Okay, so I feel like I can start moving a little bit quicker again. We're dealing with the same so, ka, toa, but now we're going to start focusing on the ka portion. What does that find for you? So let's move this out of the way. So now we're dealing with the ka portion. Okay, that deals with the cosine. So in the cosine, what we're looking at is the cosine of, guess what? It's the cosine of some angle, just like in the so part portion. And that's going to be equal to, now A stands for the adjacent. But H still stands for the hypotenuse. Hypotu. And I think I still spelled that thing wrong, but we'll get to abbreviating here shortly. So that's the formula. Now let's look at the triangle and figure out what is different about this one. Again, it still only works if you are working with a right triangle. If you don't have a right triangle, it just isn't going to do it for you. And you still have to have some angle here. We'll call that x. But now all of a sudden, the adjacent side is the side that is next to, as in the side that is next to. This one right here. This is the adjacent. Right? The adjacent side. Now, with that adjacent side, you know that the hypotenuse hasn't changed. The hypotenuse is still opposite the right angle. That hasn't changed. So we can start moving quite a bit quicker because you've seen some of this stuff. So there it is. So now, let's talk about the same slide kind of question because we like building slides, don't we? Let's go back to that same first question we had. So I need first my marker. Here we go, blue. Bam. Ja. Ja. Right angle there. And that first question, I think, was a 20-degree angle. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was 30 degrees. I don't really remember at this point. Oh, no, you're right. It was a 30-degree angle. 30-degree angle. And what we found was that the length of this slide was 20 feet, if you remember right. And I think the height we had was 10 feet, but that's kind of irrelevant at this point. What we actually want to know is, what's the footprint? What's the distance on the ground? What is this right here? Right? That's our question mark. That is the adjacent side of the triangle. Again, adjacent references the angle to here, right? The adjacent meaning this is the adjacent. Okay, so now that we know that, the formula otherwise writes out just like it has before. We start substituting in our parts. We want to know what is the footprint on the ground. How much space in the ground is this thing actually going to take? And we know that the slide's 20 feet long, and we know that it's a 30-degree angle, so we have a different third part of a triangle. So let's see. On this one, we need the cosine of 30 degrees because we know that part is equal to the adjacent, right? The adjacent over the hypotenuse. So that we have the adjacent, which, well, I'm going to use the letter A to abbreviate that, over the hypotenuse. Okay, so now I'm going to press pause and I'm going to use end solve on this thing. Okay, so what did I actually type in? I put the primer marker on, the end solve in front, cosine 30 degrees. Don't forget to use the degree symbol, comma A, because A is the variable I'm using, and the answer it gave me was 17.32, and that would be measured in feet because, well, the reason it's measuring in feet is because this is 20 feet, so that must be also 20 feet. If this length is measured in feet, then this length is measured in feet. Heck, so is this one. All of these would be measured in feet. You got to stay consistent. The degree is the oddball duck. But anyway, so that's the answer. Here we go. We're going to jump to a brand new one. Wasn't that fast? Okay, so here we are, continuing on with a brand new blank page. Quickly, we're still looking at SOHCAHTOA, and we're only looking at the CA portion now. The CA, to remind you, the C stands for cosine. The A stands for the adjacent. Now the adjacent, remember, you've got your x angle here. The adjacent is next to the x angle, as opposed to the opposite, adjacent, it's next to, the opposite is across. And then your hypotenuse is always across from your right angle. Your right angle across from your right angle is your hypotenuse. Okay, so I'm going to quickly write out that formula. You had the cosine of your x angle is equal to the adjacent divided by the hypotenuse. Look at that, we're flying. Once you get good at this stuff, you sort of just stop writing it down because you can see that acronym and how you can see how this acronym turns into that formula. The A is on top, the H is on bottom. The O is on top, the H is on bottom. Right? It's the sine of an angle equals the O is on top, the H is on bottom. The cosine of an angle, the H is on top. Sorry, the A is on top, the H is on bottom. And it's always going to look like that. That's why this is such a cool tool. One tool and you've got everything you could ever want. Okay, so now let's look at a different slide type scenario. Here we go. We need a new color. I'm tired of that color. Here we go. And boom, boom, boom. Now let's say that we happen to know that this slide takes up a whopping 19 feet on the ground, a whopping 19 feet. And we also happen to know that the angle of this slide is a interesting 37 degrees. Well, the question comes back to, I wonder how long the actual slide platform is. Okay, I wonder how long the actual slide platform is. So we use our handy dandy formula here. We take our parts, we put them into the formula. So we go the 37, the 19, and the H. I'm going to write it all out for you. You should also be writing this out. So we have the cosine of the 37 degrees equals, the adjacent was 19 over the, I'm going to use hypotenuse. I'm using the H. Again, that's the hypotenuse. I'm just using as the H right there. So let's see, let's shrink that so that I can then, of course, I'm putting in front of that because on the calculator, I could do math manipulation and deal with this. Come ask me, we'll talk about it. But the calculator will make sure you don't divide wrong or do something else weird. So n solve. Put that there, and the variable in this case is an H. So I need a comma H at the end. Press pause, and I'm going to calculate it. Okay, so I just calculated it. Don't you love those pause buttons? It saves you, so the things is n solve. Again, you find that under the menu button. I'll show you in a quick video. Don't forget the degree symbol right there because that way you're telling the calculator I'm working in degrees, not radians. Degrees is important. And then I'm using the fraction bar, which is found above the division key here. You should go take a look at that. And you type the whole thing in, the whole kit and caboodle in, and you're going to get an awesome answer of 23.79. 23.79. The units are feet, right? Bam, isn't that nice? So that means this slide is 23.79 feet long. Isn't that great? Okay, so I'm now going to press pause one more time, clear the board, and get you to do one more all on your own. Okay, so here we go. Just to recap, we're looking at SOHCAHTOA. The CA is the part we're focusing on right now. Cosine adjacent hypotenuse. There's the cosine of the angle equals the adjacent over the hypotenuse. This acronym is a brain memory phonetic mnemonic thing to help you remember this formula. This is the formula. This is the tool right here. This tool represents a right triangle. It doesn't work if it's not a right triangle. The angle is one of the angles. The hypotenuse is across from the right angle. It's across from the right angle. Whereas the adjacent is next to the angle in question, or the angle that you're interested in. So here is the actual scenario. Let's do it in a, I don't know, brown. I haven't used brown. Bam, 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 right angle. These are important. It only works if it's a right angle. Here, I'm actually going to call the hypotenuse, we're going to call that 38 feet. We're getting a little bit longer. I mean, these slides are starting to get kind of big. That's almost 10 yards. That's almost 12 yards. That's a hefty slide. And we're going to say that the footprint on the ground is actually something like 27 feet. Well, the question here would be, what is the angle right there? What is that angle? I don't know. That's your job. On a separate sheet of paper, go ahead and figure it all out. Make sure you turn it in.